lot of artists were like, oh, I don't know exactly about my style. Like, how do I fit in? Like, nothing looks like what I'm doing. Like, I don't feel like I'm going to find people who like it. So maybe I should change and like do something more in line with what I see. This is the worst idea, right? Like, it's just like, stick to your guts, like stick to like what you do. And we've all been like kind of wronged by PFP projects that sell out in seconds, that make millions in like 1 minute. This is not an achievable goal and benchmark. I think this is like anything that takes more than 2 seconds of due diligence or of research to understand is not going to sell out in seconds.
Hi everyone, I am excited to bring you another brilliant episode of NEWFORUM. NEWFORUM is a community podcast inviting purpose-driven visionaries, creators, developers, and investors to spark accessible conversations on the topics of crypto, the metaverse, NFT, and everything Web3. And today I have a super special guest with me, and she is Fanny Lakoubay. She's a crypto art collector and advisor via LAL ART Advisory since 2018. LAL ART advises private and institutional collectors, artists, and some select startups and corporations in their discovery and navigation of the NFT and crypto art space. Hey, Fanny, thanks again for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Like it's great to be here.
Amazing. So, Fanny, you have 14 years of experience in art, technology, and finance. How did all the experience lead you to becoming a digital art advisor specialized in NFTs and eventually becoming the founder of LAL Art?
Yeah, it's not been a straight line. That's what I'm gonna start with. I think it's an interesting. It's very interesting to hear how people end up in that space, because we're all a little bit a bunch of reject, right? Like we just said like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I did this, I did that, and then like finally clicked when we came to that like crypto art and NFT community. So for me, that like not straight line started with, you know, banking, which I spent 1 year and like, what the fuck am I doing there? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then when I moved to New York, almost 22 years ago, I decided I had studied business and art history. And so I had decided like, oh, it's a great move, like New York, let's start like in the art market. And I started at ArtNet, and 8 years at ArtNet, which is kind of like in jobs that like now we call art and tech, which was absolutely not called that at the time. I mean, at the time, ArtNet was still quite like the only, and I mean, the first online marketplace for the art market. And then worked at a very small startup for collection management system for collectors, galleries, that actually was acquired by Christie's. And that's how I came to Christie's and stayed in various like more like product team and operations jobs, like, so not the glamorous like, you know, gallery and specialist and like, and we're still techies within the Christie's ecosystem. And then in 2018, like that's when I left Christie's and started actually consulting. I had very small children at the time and it made sense, and I started with Elena Zavelev, who founded Kadaf, alongside Andrea Steuer, who was also in your podcast. And we started organizing panels about art and technology. And in 2018, obviously, we were not, like, the art market was not talking about NFTs, but they were already talking about blockchain for certificate of authenticities on the blockchain for physical artworks. And, you know, still now people, when they say blockchain, NFTs, don't really know what, you know, we don't really just throw a keyword out there. But at the time it was like, oh yeah, blockchain, I love it. This is great. And they're like, oh, don't really know what that is. Even us, we were like, oh, I don't really quite know. So we organized one panel about art and blockchain. And normally at these like small panels, we had like 20, 30 people coming, like, at 6 p.m. on the Thursday. And then the blockchain one, we had like, it was 100 people, not enough chairs in the room. And we're like, oh, okay, maybe there's something out there that people want to figure out and want to learn more about. And so from panels, we organized conferences via like something called New Art Academy. And then when Christie's started organizing their Art and Tech Summit, you can't really compete with Christie's. And so we're like, oh, okay, let's try something else. And so that's when we started the Crypto and Digital Art Fair, CADAF, in New York in 2019. And during that time with CADAF and New Art Academy, I also consulted with NFT marketplace, like early NFT marketplaces like snark.art, which was a production studio for established artists who wanted to experiment with blockchain. And even now it's a little early to like, or it's still hard to talk about that to traditional artists. I mean, at the time it was close to impossible, right? Like, I mean, it was really, you had to stop at the word blockchain. and so yeah, so that's but they wanted someone to help like talk with artists, with the traditional art market, and kind of help that bridge. And so we did, like, I did consulting and build up a team around me to help. And then when the Beeple sale happened, and more traditional art collectors started to be interested in joining and starting collecting digital art and NFT like collections, like they back in March 2021. This is kind of when we started really focusing on advising collectors, and always also try to find a way to still work with artists directly, because in all my years in the art market at ArtNet, at Christie's, like, it was a very appalling a little bit, like the way that artists were treated like a commodity, right? Like, it was like, oh, you sell vacuum cleaners or you sell artworks by artists. So it kind of had the same amount of respect like as vacuum cleaners, right, in the traditional art market. And so, and I had never worked directly with artists, and it was kind of like missing this, and kind of amazed that like the title or the job title artist advisor is not actually a thing in the traditional art market, right? So now we do a lot of workshops and advisory for artists as well, and so really share our time between collectors, artists, and some projects who want to start within Web3. So yeah, this is and it's fun. I think this is kind of where joining in early in 2018. I think the good thing was that it was very much like a smaller kind artist community, and really making friends, and if you look now at like the very early crypto art collections, the best ones are the ones compiled by artists. Like they're like any art movement that's starting, even going back to the Impressionist, or like there's at first there's no collector, right? Like there's no like collector or support of patrons, and it's really the artists who are supporting other artists and collecting their art. And I think it was the same. And if you look at like Ilan Katten or Mattia Cutini or Coldy's like collections, like they're great collections because they are all collecting from artists that they know, respect, and that they're friends with. So this is still very special, I would say.
It's a pretty interesting journey, and I think you're quite inspiring to like you said, you're working in banking and somehow you found your way here. And I'm also curious to know, like, how do you, because in order to advise, you have to keep yourself updated with everything, and then that FOMO vibe could kind of come in if you had to like be away or do something. So how do you stay updated with everything to be able to give, I guess, the best advice possible to these artists?
Yeah. No, I think I mean, so there's a few things. I mean, it's true that like 2021 actually helped with awareness about NFTs and and get more adoption and so on and so forth. But it also did not help categorize NFTs, right? Like and everything that people saw in the news and headlines were about collectibles. And if you look at the volumes of also like NFTs created in 2021, like 50% is collectible. And art is was only 16%, like in that, like, you know, pie chart from, quote my sources, nonfungible.com. And I think this is kind of where up to, I would say, like the spring of 2022, the problem was that if you wanted to attend like an NFT conference or an NFT event, it was everything and at once. Like it was collectible, it was gaming, it was like, you know, everything mashed together, which is like, it doesn't really make sense, right, anymore. Like I think it like the NFT like market as a whole grew enough, and I think we all saw it at NFT NYC in June 2022, I mean of this year, where it was the first time that like really you could pick the verticals that we were interested in. Okay, you were interested in like gaming, you had a lot of like gaming programming and events to go to. Like you were interested in music, you could go to like other events. You were interested in art, you had like exhibits or you know, like salons to go to and so on and so forth. And I think this is like finally like the space is maturing enough that like now it makes sense for people to you know, we used to say like, oh, I hate NFTs, and you're like, well, it's kind of like you were saying you hate books or websites. Like that doesn't really mean anything, right? Like it's like you can't hate an envelope, like, because you can put anything you want within the NFT, like, you know, format. So I think this is kind of where that separations of verticals, I think, help as well with the FOMO, and was like, oh my God, I can't keep track of everything. Because at one point you were like, fuck, I need to like follow what's happening in DeFi. And I was like, I don't know. Like, it's not like what I want to do. Like, it's like, I don't want to know about these things. But you kind of felt you had to, right? And it's kind of, and you see in Twitter, like there are a lot of artists, a lot of people who burn out, right? Because there is literally no limitation to what you can or should know or should learn about. So one way I coped with it is to actually put a newsletter every week. So on Friday, stick to it. Like it can be late on Friday, but let's stick to it. It's publishing a news feed about what's happening specifically in the crypto art space, and then some general news that like it's good to know what's going on. You know, like if you don't know like about, you know, Tornado Cash, like the privacy fallout, like the Ethereum like merge, like these are things that impact you, even if you're not directly interested in DeFi or like, you know, blockchain protocols. And so by obliging myself to say like, okay, they're like, you know, like a few thousand followers were like expecting that newsletter, I have to put it out. It actually does help me keep in touch with like what's going on generally in the market. And then as an advisor, you also need to you know, keep in touch with like new platforms that are you know, like popping up, new artworks, new exhibits, like things that don't make it into the newsletter, right? Like I mean, I can publish everything for free in the newsletter, but for that, like, to be honest, the best way I've found to keep in touch is to spend a lot of time talking to people and having calls, like, you know, with artists, with like platforms, like really taking the time, because, you know, I also tried like to just follow things on Twitter, online, and it's and it was very interesting because we all have biases, right? And so when you read things online, you probably, you know, read one comment that someone put on Twitter before another one that someone else put, and then this twisted your idea of what's going on. And the way I identified it is then when I was talking to people like, you know, journalists or like other curators or other advisors, they had a total different view on a project that I had read about, and then talking about it with them, we're like, oh, like maybe we should talk to them to actually figure out like what it is. And it's a really big problem, like to form an informed, kind of knowledge of the project that are going on. And it's something we've actually been working on with something called the Blockchain Art Directory, and it's a project that was started by Judith Seipold in 2017, which was a way to try to record all the details about the platforms, about the projects that were going on. And at the time, she had a very hard time because nobody really cared about these details, or the project did not really care about like giving her the details either. So we're relaunching the project of a blockchain art directory and trying to decentralize it and see what decentralization means for documentation. So it's like, I don't want to say it's like a Wikipedia, like a decentralized Wikipedia, because they tried that, but it did not really work very well. But just trying to get more resources and not writing it all ourselves, right? Like you're doing a great job with the podcast, like Right Click Save does a great job with articles along with Outland, but just trying to make sense of it and kind of give people like a way in to know where to find like all this information, or at least get started, like, give them pointers about where to find things. But it's a tough one, but you have to let go of the FOMO, I think.
Yes, I think letting go of the FOMO is really important, especially with the mental health stuff, because you also want to make sure you're taking care of the mind. And speaking about information and where to find information, I'm curious to know, is the cryptocurrency market really crashing, and how has this influenced crypto art market today? And then maybe it would be nice to kind of define the difference between crypto art market and NFT art market.
As I said, like NFTs is it's a way to transact and kind of secure and transact digital assets. And so within an NFT, like if you think about it as a little like Easter egg, you can literally open like an NFT and then put any digital files that you want in it, right? So that's kind of then how you define like categories of NFTs is with what's inside the Easter egg. And it can be like, mostly it is still collectibles. Like it's still quite the biggest part of the market, or it can be like gaming elements, or it can be like metaverse. It's kind of a metaverse currency if you want, like, or the items that are appearing in the virtual world. Like you can have really many other things. I mean, anything. And then art is one of these things that like are in, like, can be inside the Easter egg. And again, I think this is kind of like the market of NFTs has verticals, right? So there's like the collectibles, the gaming, metaverse, utility as well, and art. And this is kind of where like art is still a niche of the whole NFT market. And this is kind of like the art part of the NFT market is what we've called like the crypto art market. It had other names, like in 2018, we actually wrote a paper with Maria Paula Fernandez and Stina Gustafsson that you had also on the panel, which was called "There is no such thing as blockchain art," because at the time everybody was calling it blockchain art, and bad like the blockchain art directory like come from that period where it was blockchain art. Then you had NFT art, then you had probably other things that I'm forgetting right now. And then like now it seems more accepted that like this is like crypto art. But again, like if you then zoom in on this like small vertical of crypto art, this is a very diverse like vertical because you can, again, going back to my Easter egg, like the type of art that you can put, like it like can be any genre, any like kind of like category, right? And if we stick to like the purely like digital art, like it can still be photography, digital drawings, or illustrations, digital paintings, 3D works, architecture, conceptual art, etc., etc. Like I think this is like still where, and very against like trying to put things in boxes, like I'm really just giving kind of these pointers, because it's like we probably have not seen like 5% of like what can be done with that format, right? Like, and I think this is, you know, like something that one of the current Twitter like debate is like, you know, is it too early to write like the crypto art history? Because there's this like trend right now to kind of play archaeologist and like go back and talk about the historical or the history of crypto art, and it's a very biased thing to write history, right? Like if you look at like how like history was written, like mostly by European white male, because it was centralized, like this is like, we have to learn from like, you know, that and our mistakes as a society, and not try to kind of go back and say like, this is the history of like crypto art, and like, and these artists were important at first, and so on. Because it's like, yes, it's important, it's a great idea to like rediscover artists who were there at the beginning, and they're what I call the crypto art builders, and they're like build a space and might not have been yet recognized for it, and are still selling for like very small amounts compared to you know, kind of the blue chip Pack and Beeple and Xcopy. But we also have to find a way to be able to tell our story, because again, we all have biases, and I have my history of crypto art and you have yours, and we don't have to date back to 2017 or 2018 or 2014 like to have our history matter, you know, like the artists you've met like with the podcast and along the way, like for you this is the history of like crypto art, and this is part of the reason why I also moved from New York to Argentina. It was to also be able to discover like another scene, right? I mean, this is very easy when you're in Europe to be Europe-centric, when you're in the US to be like US-centric, and kind of like put some blinders on and be like, oh, okay, I'm only going to talk about artists in New York. And you see that there are a lot of artists that artists repeat themselves, right? Like in exhibits and curated shows. And just going last year to Mexico City, and meaning like there's a brilliant crypto art scene there. Along with the rest of LATAM, and it's like discovering new projects and new artists, and it's that do matter as much as the ones that are in New York, even more, like because here people can really make a living out of you know, the practice for the first time. So yeah, like trying to be mindful of all of that.
No, this is incredible. I feel like, you know, diversity is really important, and we say Web3 is diverse and all of that. And I really like that you're, you know, pushing yourself to access, I'd say like the emerging market and other like talents, and there are a lot of creators in other parts of the world, right?
Yeah,
so why don't we exactly? And so I really like what you're doing with that. And currently there's been this debate around licensing and royalties, which is like pretty much trending on Twitter. I want to know your stance on this.
Yeah. I mean, there's well, first, if we start with licensing, I mean, there've been this kind of clash of two worlds between entertainment industry and art industry, where because 2021 kind of like where it started, like this licensing and copyright debate started with the collectibles, and the collectibles, like the, you know, CryptoPunk project was launched as an art project by Matt and John, and as such Lava Labs like retained the copyright on the CryptoPunks, meaning that like if you purchase a CryptoPunk, you could use it like privately, but you could not like make, you know, t-shirts or movies like out of your CryptoPunk. And that's normal for like any artist who sell, like, you know, in the contemporary art world, like any artist who like sell their work like retain the copyright. So you can't, like, even if you get a Andy Warhol like painting, you can't use it in a movie or like make t-shirts out of it. That's normal. But it's not the case in the entertainment industry, where like you, like, you know, like you tend to have like IP rights coming with like illustrations and collectibles. And like Bored Apes Yacht Club was launched by more of an entertainment like company. And therefore, as you purchased a Bored Ape, you could, and people have, created cartoons around that like Bored Ape, or launched a fast food chain like out of a Bored Ape, or used it in the movie. That was fine, because that was like used that was, you know, part of the terms and which is common in the entertainment industry. And that kind of crowd, like entertainment crowd, took over, right? Like the debates, or like the amount of collectibles that were put out by entertainment companies like was larger than by artists. And that became standard. And then people were like, what the fuck? Like, I can't like, you know, like create a fast food chain from my CryptoPunk? Like, why is it like, it's not worth anything? So there've been like a few like project, I'll fast forward, but they then when Yuga Labs acquired like CryptoPunks, they actually, the first thing they did, like I think it was announced the same day as the acquisition, was to say that now you could actually they were changing this rule that like you could, like the owner of the CryptoPunk would now actually own the IP as well, and could therefore like, you know, like do whatever they wanted with their punk. Their actual license terms came out this week from Yuga Lab, and it's actually not as like permissive as like, yeah, you can do like a porn movie like with your like CryptoPunk. Like there are some limitation, and it's very well written by like very expensive lawyers. So Yuga Labs like really retain the right to block any use that they would disagree with, that you do with your CryptoPunk. Anyway, I guess, you know, tire aside, like this is so. But then that's transpired into like the like art, like crypto art ecosystem, where people say, well, you know, there's a lot of like problems to enforce, like copyrights, right? And NFTs don't actually help in any way with that. Like there's just no protection. Like artists still have to say, I retain the copyright. There's no like standards, you know, like that was brought with like NFTs, and then they said, well, if it's like that unenforceable and like constraining and not in line with like the idea of collaboration, remixing of artworks, why not just like all use like the CC0 like licensing, which is like just say no copyright. And the first artist who like did that, like, or established that he would like put all his artwork like as like CC0 like license, is Xcopy. And it makes sense for Xcopy, right? Xcopy is already established, and he has all the interest in the world to have other artists remix, use his work to actually make his own work more iconic, right? Like, because we all know that like remixes of like the Andy Warhol, like Marilyn and so on and so forth, like actually just like increase the hype around one's art. But it's much different for like young unknown artists, right? Where it can actually be like quite detrimental to them to not have any control over their art and just be okay with like just, you know, like that art to be copied and used by someone else. So it's I mean, I don't want this is an hour-long conversation pretty much, like, but this is like something that is currently like being discussed, and alongside with royalties, that we had a protocol last week that was released that actually allowed traders and anyway, it's a protocol that like allows traders and speculators to bypass the payment of royalties. And I think this is also like one misconception that NFTs bring royalties, like, you know, auto-enforceable royalties like to all artists. Even in like 2017, 2018, where there was no primary market, royalties was already like a big keyword that was like attracting people. But it's actually very hard to enforce, and it's not in the terms of the smart contracts themselves. It's kind of a social contract like that is at the platform level. And in 2017, 2018, there was a group of artists led by like Sparrow, AI artist. Like they discussed and sat down with every single like NFT marketplaces to have them respect and enforce royalties. Now you have like problems between like between platforms with aggregators like OpenSea. So if you like purchase something on Super Rare and then resell it not on Super Rare but on OpenSea, because you can see it on OpenSea, royalties are not going to pass through. And artists have discovered that at their expense, like to being like, by not knowing it at first and being like, oh shit, like wait, I should have got royalties and I did not. What happened? And so there's this big thing like that. And then again, like these protocols that I was talking about that allow you to bypass them, kind of, you know, exploit this like unenforceability of like royalties. And so it's a lot of things butt heading right now between different industries, between different positions, but also you know, and it's very important that like people know about these things, that like they might not have known that like you know, copyright is like is a thing in the contemporary art market. And then people will say like, oh, like we care about like you know, like royalties. Well, you're like, okay, but you know, like this is the only kind of like retirement fund or like passive income like for artists, like, and so on and so forth. So I think that's like we'll see where it goes, and it will but it's interesting that like these current debates are actually around the topics that like we thought that the magic word NFT like was just magically fixing everything, but it's not. So it's like now it's surfacing, but it's been there all along. So it's fascinating. I mean, I think this is you know, like when in the art, like in our lifetime, have we seen like economics and rules change in the art market? Never. Like now we're like, you know, it's like it's moving. It's like some new things, some new like models as well for artists like that are you know, like UBI, but for artists like Dada Collective is actually currently exploring some other ways artists could be paid, and DAOs for artists is like another way to you know, kind of manage a treasury. There's so many new things that the Web3 technology can bring, and yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, it's it's complicated. I mean, the whole debate thing, because I keep scrolling through Twitter and I'm just like, okay, you know, everybody has something to say. And I'm also curious to know, because you mentioned a bit about DAOs, and I'm thinking, do you think or like every artist can benefit from being a part of the DAO in terms of maybe even navigating some of these things that we've discussed? Or what do you think? I mean, also, will LAL Art eventually become a DAO?
So not LAL Art, but like BAD, like the blockchain art directory. I think there's like there's also similarly to NFTs, there's this like mythology around DAOs, right? Like that, like NFTs and DAOs are gonna magically fix every like governance problem we've ever had. And I think we have to bring back the DAOs where they belong, being like a tool, but that needs to serve a very specific purpose. And we've seen a lot of DAOs like fail, right? Like, I mean, this is like, if you don't have the right incentives to vote, or like the right engagement of the member of a DAO, having a DAO is not going to make them vote, right? And it's like, we've seen like many DAOs where like 1-2% of like members vote, and it's like the apathy like level is like, you know, it's just human, right? Like DAOs are not going to fix that. And what I've seen work really well is to use, and I would say DAO for the sake of argument, but like if I say DAO, it's like you don't have to form an official DAO. There are tools to vote, or like you don't have to incorporate, you know, like just fully deploy a DAO. Like there are tools involved in a DAO that like can be like handpicked and like selected like for specific purposes. But one use case that I really like for DAOs is artist collectives. So it relies on like a very old model, right? Like of an artist cooperative that like, you know, artists or creatives put funds together to manage a treasury and leverage like kind of a collective and like have a better platform and a bigger voice than they would individually. And I'll give you one example. It's a DAO called Cyberbat DAO. And Cyberbat DAO is actually a DAO created by and for artists of African descent to help them, like, you know, like get into exhibits or shows or tell their story. And Cyberbat actually applied last year to participate to Art Dubai Art Fair. And as you might know, like art fairs mostly deal with galleries and never deal with individual artists. But as an organization, Cyberbat DAO managed to have a booth at Art Dubai International Art Fair, which would never have been possible like with, you know, like artist by artist or just like individually. And there's many other you know, like DAOs and artist DAOs, like there's Agenda DAO, which is for artists, non-binary and transgender artists. Like there's, I mean, of course, when I'm like trying to tell you all the DAOs that I know about, I'm totally blanking. But Cyberbat and Agenda DAO is already to Her Story DAO as well for female artists, like et cetera, et cetera. and I think this is like DAOs are like a vehicle, and it works when it has a very specific purpose and kind of a one goal thing, right? Like where it's like all over the place and all like, and you want to put everything and make everybody vote on everything in one DAO. That doesn't really works. But yeah, so I mean, it's fascinating, and some things that you know, if we talk about like governance and coordination, I mean, I used to work for many years and still I'm involved with the Radical Exchange Foundation. And Radical Exchange is a foundation that was started by Glenn Weil and Vitalik Buterin is at the board of the foundation, the Minister of Digital of Taiwan as well. And they're working on like mechanisms to help governance, democracy, and kind of like there's a lot of experiments on tools that are actually being used in DAOs. And one example is Gitcoin, not Bitcoin, Gitcoin. Gitcoin being like the kind of, you know, indeed for crypto or like crypto developer, like blockchain developers who want to find like jobs and bounties can find that on Gitcoin. And Gitcoin has done many hackathons as well, and also grants. So they've done grants that were actually based on quadratic funding, meaning that like the way they would match the donations to the projects was not just based on like the amount that was donated, but also on like the number of people who were donating. So they would match more if 100 people gave $1 each to a project, rather than like one person giving $100 to a project. And this is called like quadratic funding. I mean, I'm summarizing very much, but quadratic funding is one thing that Radical Exchange has done to really help give more voice to the community-supported projects and crowdfunding. There's a lot more that Gitcoin is actually experimenting. I really encourage everybody, like not just like, you know, who is in crypto art, collectible, whatever, to really look at what Gitcoin is doing. They're currently working on something called Gitcoin passports, and that's more towards like working on like digital identity thing. And the founder of Gitcoin has this. I mean, any talk by Kevin Owoki is worth watching. And it has this like research thread around coordination, that like everything we're talking about, like all these projects and literally all the discussions we've had like in the past hour, if you think about it, it's all about coordination. And that's his like say, it's like it's all about coordination. It's always been. And if we find ways to coordinate better in line with, you know, like our values, or like the decentralization and like the unbiased and the diversity, then we will succeed. And I think it's very, very true. And very, you know, for people who know me, they're like, oh, stop with the coordination. Like, it's annoying.
I mean, it's
So,
important, you know, human
it
coordination.
is, and it's nothing new, you know,
almost
like
everything.
psychology,
Exactly.
marketing, like all of that is like, you know,
Exactly.
how you coordinate.
Yes, and that's a
Anyway,
big.
I'm digressing. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that's a big part of what we do as well at New Foundation. You work with a diverse group of people. You experience so much, and I'm just curious to know what have been some of your learning experiences as, you know, as a crypto art collector and advisor. I mean, since 2018, and what advice will you give, let's say, an NFT artist listening to you, if there's anything?
Yeah, what I've learned is that, like, you know, going back to your comment on like the FOMO and like how you keep in a track of everything and sanity. I think one big thing is like what I learned is like, don't try to be cool. Like this is like, don't try too hard. Like just do what you can, what you physically and mentally can, and that's enough. You know, like we're enough. Like this is like, you know, this everything needs time. And if you miss something, this is for, you know, like a higher reason or something. We don't want to include God or like any like entity like discussion, but this is for a reason that like this is humanly not possible. So I think like you have to cut yourself some slack and kind of you know, focus on things that matter. And I think Jason Bailey like posts about that like regularly from Art Gnome, about like don't collect things that other people find popular, or that like what the market dictates you, because you're always going to be behind. Because if you hear about it, it's too late. It's like finance, you know. It's like if there are people who are like entire job like day and night is to figure these things out, you will not, you know, like find like the next CryptoPunk. Like stop trying. Like this is not like a thing that like you know, that is worth pursuing. And I think this is kind of where like you know, collecting artists that matter to you as friends, as like, you know, an art like form that you like, or something you like to see on your walls, or like, you know, kind of like following a reason and sticking to it, and is important. And because if you look at like the projects in the space, like so many just like after 3 months of trying, just like, you know, give up. So even if you try like for more than 3 months or like 6 months, like for something, it's worth, you know, like the like sticking to something. And I think it's the same for artists. I think there's a lot of artists who are like, oh, I don't know exactly about my style, like how do I fit in, like nothing looks like what I'm doing, like I don't feel like I'm gonna find people who like it, so maybe I should change and like do something more in line with what I see. This is the worst idea, right? Like it is like, stick to your guts, like stick to like what you do. And we've all been like kind of wronged by PFP projects that sell out in seconds, that make millions in like 1 minute. This is not an achievable goal and benchmark. I think this is like anything that takes more than 2 seconds of due diligence or of research to understand is not going to sell out in seconds. Nor should it. Like it should not, right? But now artists have this expectation, and whatever doesn't sell out, whatever drop doesn't work, like that's failure for them. It's not. And I think this is like, you know, there's some of the best shows of like 22, 21, actually of like crypto art, like took 6 months to sell out. Even some of the most like, I mean, what I consider more, you know, like not popular, but more like successful or meaningful like PFP projects, like Women Rise project, like which was launched by this activist like Malihi Abidi. was a UK-based activist, and it took her like all her sweat and work and 6 months of like setting out the project. And now it's like, picked up by Coinbase, by like, Ledger, a lot of like, she's doing great. But it was not like an easy sale. And like everything that sells out in seconds, I'm going to say it, and you can quote me on that, like is engineered. Like it's engineered and it's like backed by giant marketing powers and entertainment firms. And if you look at most of the PFP projects, half of the like supply of these projects is actually owned by a very like small number of whales, which are investors. Like, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's not like, oh, everybody has like 1 or 2 or like 5. Like, no, some of them have hundreds. That's what finances the project. I mean, this is like, and this is what sets, what pisses me off is that like, this is what like artists have in mind for success, and it's unachievable. So I think we all have to like cut ourselves some slack and just, go have a coffee or a glass of wine.
As you said, everything happens for a reason, and stick to your guts, believe in yourself. And I think you gave us some really good advice. And I want to thank you so much, Fanny, for your time here with me today. Very insightful, very powerful, so much information, so much resources actually. And I'm wondering where our listeners and community can find you on your social platform.
Yeah, well, I'm not cool enough to have a pseudonym, so you can literally find me anywhere under my name. Yeah, I mean, we like on Twitter, Telegram, I'm F Lakubai, yeah, and if you're interested, I mean, it's free, so it's like anybody can subscribe to that newsletter I mentioned. It's fanny.substack.com. Another thing is that like cherish your community. I mean, it doesn't have to be 100,000 people like in Discord, right? Like to be a meaningful community. A community starts with your mom, your boyfriend, and your kids. I mean, literally,
it's
like
powerful.
This is a
and I know that artists watching we really appreciate this episode. And thank you all so much for being a part of today's forum. If you want to get more involved in our community, make sure to follow us on our social platforms. Twitter is NEWFORUM_NCO, and we're NEWFORUM.io on NewLife.io. You can also join our Discord community to connect with our guests. You'll find the link in the chat. And if you want to learn more about the New Foundation ecosystem, go to newcoin.org. We will have all the links in the description below, as well as Fanny's links. And take a moment, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.